Ladies and gentlemen, the party known as the EFF. You know, the party that wants to expropriate all your stuff and nationalize all the mines and basically tax you into oblivion. They say investors have nothing to fear if they ultimately get into government, apart from they'll steal all their shit.
Well, Julius Malema, the leader, actually went further. He says because the EFF will give something investors do not currently have. That is clarity, consistency, and transparency. And you know what, Byron? I actually believe him. There will be clarity on how much will be stolen. There will be consistency in how much is stolen over time. And there will be transparency in terms of what is going to be stolen because it belongs to white people. So the EFF is not actually incorrect in this regard. There will be clarity, consistency, and transparency for investors, except all those things will force investors to not invest.
See, one of the things I really struggle with, Ramon, about Julius Malema is that half the time he says something that's like, it's 100% correct, and then he just makes it batshit crazy. I don't know why he just can't stick with the 100% correct and then just like sound basically reasonable. So one of the things he actually says is that his government would not speak with forked tongues. And that actually is a very good statement because that is what Cyril Ramaphosa's government does. They say we want to be pro-investor and we want to be pro-this and pro-that. And then they put nationalization up the wazoo's, NHI, and expropriation on the table. And you're like, these things don't really match. So in that respect, Julius is 100% correct. But the outcome or the way that he thinks that he's going to achieve this great investor paradise is not rational. He basically says he's going to nationalize the mines and expropriate all the land. But he says, don't worry, he's going to make that sound a little bit palatable. So what he's actually going to do is he's going to buy into the mines. He's going to take like ownership, and then over time, he will basically take the ownership from the mines and transfer it into the hands of the government. Sounds reasonable, I suppose, you could say. The problem is the government doesn't have the money, which is why they've been toying with the idea of expropriation. Because then it's like, well, I don't have to pay you anything, just give it back. And to that degree, he actually goes further and says another policy they want is expropriation without land. But he says no one's going to lose their farms, no one's going to lose their land rights, no one's going to be driven into the sea. We're not targeting whites. You'll still own your house in the suburb of Santon. You'll still own your farm. You can still farm. You're just not going to own the land. Now that in itself, Ramon, is something that many people will be scratching their heads saying, what good is my house if I don't own the land that's on it? Because where's my house going to live? In the air?
Well, Byron, the problem with the land thing is that I know of a place where land has been expropriated, but you can own the house on top of it. It's called Mozambique. Now, I wouldn't call Mozambique a very exciting emerging market in the world. I would actually call it, well, what it is, a shithole country. So, again, the EFF wants transparency and clarity and consistency, which is excellent, but they are making sure that people understand that we're going to be a shithole economy and a shithole country based on the things they wish to impose in this country. So, again, it's fine to be consistent, but if you consistently shit, it's not fine now, is it?
No, it's not. Now, you see, there is something that's really weird about Julius's bullshit. And he says that basically what this actually all is fear-mongering. Because you see, businesses won't understand how they will have forms of state control with private ownership. No, mate, it's not that they don't understand how you're going to have private ownership. They understand you're not going to have private ownership. That's the point. So what they're effectively going to do, and he says, businesses will be skeptical and we will suffer a capital flight. Mate, you're going to have a capital flight because nobody wants to give you their money for nothing. Nobody wants to say, here, make me poor, have all my money, and you just use it for, I don't know, your yachts and your Gucci t-shirts. Like, no one wants to do that. So clearly, they're going to move their money to a place where they think their property rights are more sacrosanct and that their money will be better protected. I mean, that's logical. But to Julius, it's not. So he says, don't worry, we've got a plan. And that is, the Russians and the Chinese will take the place of all the capital flight. Except they won't.
No, indeed they won't. But here's the problem, right, with investors. Investors don't care what Julius says because it changes all the time and it changes every day. You know, he wants to kill white people the one day and then sort of say that white people are real the next day. Ladies, come, please go. I'm working here. Thank you. So, you know, rhetoric doesn't help investors at all because rhetoric is easy. It's cheap. Everyone can have it. It's a bit like an arsehole. Everyone has rhetoric. What is Julius's plans? What does he keep saying over and over again? He keeps saying over and over again, we want to turn South Africa into Cuba and into Mozambique. That's all. Doesn't matter what he says, that's what he wants to do. And he's been consistent on this. We want to turn South Africa into a communist shithole because that is how he will gain power. And you know what? Rhetoric is cheap, but in reality, the hard decisions are made by people with money and people who wish to invest somewhere. They're not going to fall for this at all. And the Russians and the Chinese, they're not going to fall for this either. They have no impetus to save South Africa or to replace the investment left behind by the Europeans and the Americans. The Russians and the Chinese are extractive economies. They're not here to save South Africa. They're going to come in here, bribe the politicians, and take what they want. Similar to the UK and the US, mind you. But it's not going to be a one-for-one comparison.
Yes, I think, you see, this is where Julius gets himself unstuck, is that he doesn't have an economic degree. In fact, his idea of economics is, how much money can you give me? How much money for the big guy? You see, the problem here inevitably becomes, Ramon, and that what Julius doesn't seem to understand is that when the West invests, the West feels the need to almost virtue signal and say, look how much money we put there and local jobs we created, and check how great this is. Aren't we great? Because, our virtue is fantastic. The West loves a good virtue signal. The East doesn't. Russia and China, they're not interested in giving you money to be virtuous. They're there for political favors. And the political favors usually revolve around extraction of minerals, because those economies are very nationalistic to their own interests. China isn't interested about almost having a degree of colonial oversight of South Africa. They don't care. They're not there to give you money to go, oh, great, look how lovely we are. We enriched your country. What they're there to do is go, how many of your manganese rights can we have? Because we need that in China so that we can create cheap shit to sell to the rest of the world. Russia will be looking around things like gold and platinum. They'll be going, how much of that can we get? Because we need that to make Russia a stronger country. They're not interested in making your country richer. They're interested in taking your resources to make their country richer. And this ultimately is what Julius doesn't seem to understand. So when he says the Russians and the Chinese are going to come in here, to extract, that's exactly what they do. They will extract your resources. And for proof of that, just look at every other African country where China has gone in and Russia has gone in and helped the African country. The help that they have been given is non-existent. They give them something like a new airport in exchange for the coal mines. And then when the coal mines aren't running properly and they don't get paid, they expropriate the airport as well, because that's part of the contract. These guys are not coming to invest in the same way that the West would. But Julius doesn't seem to understand that, because he thinks all commies are the same and they'll all just commie harder, baby.
Yeah, and it's the imperative of Russian and Chinese to deal with foreign relations and trade as they wish. Like, I'm not against them or for them whatsoever. But Julius fails to understand the complexity of what he's talking about, as per usual. When you get 30% in woodwork in matric, this is what happens. You're dealing with idiots trying to run a sophisticated economy like South Africa. So at the end of the day, thankfully, Julius is not going to be anywhere close to power by the looks of it. He wants the EFF to be the Minister of Finance for any future possible coalitions. I'm not too sure anyone actually wants to give him that at all. So two things, interestingly. No one trusts Julius Malema, not even investors. And due to that, he's not going to get anywhere close to power at this stage. So good news for everyone.